The ocean is the last true frontier on Earth, a world of crushing pressure, eternal darkness, and life forms so strange they defy our understanding. For the scientists who brave its depths, it is a place of profound beauty and immense danger. They know that when you enter the ocean, you are entering a world where you are not the apex predator. This is the story of a veteran marine biologist who, for a few terrifying minutes, crossed the unimaginable boundary between observer and prey, and returned with a discovery so impossible it would challenge the very laws of science. Our story begins in the vibrant, sun-drenched waters of a barrier reef, a teeming metropolis of coral and marine life. Leading the expedition was Ethan Harper, a marine biologist with over 20 years of experience in the field. He was not just a scientist, he was an underwater storyteller, his life's work dedicated to capturing the secret behaviors of the ocean's most elusive creatures. His specialty was cetology, the study of whales and dolphins, and on this day, he and his team were documenting the feeding patterns of Bride's whales, a species known for its dynamic and powerful hunting techniques. To understand the terrifying event that was about to unfold, one must first understand the mechanics of these magnificent creatures. Bride's whales are baleen whales, a group that includes the colossal blue whale and the humpback. They do not have teeth. Instead, their upper jaws are lined with hundreds of baleen plates, dense curtains of keratin that act as a massive filter. When they feed, they perform a maneuver known as lunge feeding. They accelerate towards a dense school of fish or krill and open their mouths to an almost 90-degree angle, engulfing thousands of gallons of water and prey in a single, colossal gulp. It is one of the most dramatic events in the natural world. Crucially, while their mouths are vast caverns, their throats, or esophagi, are incredibly narrow, often no larger than a grapefruit. It is physically impossible for a baleen whale to swallow anything as large as a human. This is a fact that Ethan Harper knew better than almost anyone. He had built his career on this knowledge, a fact that allowed him to get incredibly close to these gentle giants to capture his groundbreaking footage. He respected them, he understood them, but he did not fear them. This scientific certainty would soon be tested in the most visceral way imaginable. On this particular day, the conditions were perfect. A massive bait ball, a shimmering, swirling vortex of thousands of small fish had formed near the reef. This was the signal. Ethan's team on the support boat could see the whales approaching on their monitors. Through his underwater earpiece, he heard the voice of his spotter, Claire. "Ethan, multiple whales inbound on your position. They're getting ready to lunge. We advise you surface now." But Ethan, focused through the lens of his high-definition camera, was capturing the shot of a lifetime. The light was perfect. The fish were moving in a mesmerizing dance, and he was in the perfect position. He chose to stay just a few moments longer. He was so engrossed in his work that he didn't notice one of the massive whales altering its trajectory, heading directly for the bait ball that was now all around him. He felt it before he saw it, a sudden, powerful shift in the water pressure, a deep thrum that vibrated through his entire body. He looked up from his camera just as a shadow fell over him, a shadow that blotted out the sun. The world became a swirling vortex of fish and water, and then, in an instant, everything went completely and utterly dark. He was no longer in the ocean, he was somewhere else. Disoriented, he fumbled for the light on his camera. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the slick, pink surface in front of him. He tilted the light up and saw the unmistakable fringed curtain of baleen plates. He was inside the whale's mouth. While Ethan was coming to terms with his impossible tomb, his team on the surface was in a state of controlled panic. They had watched in horror as their friend and colleague disappeared into the whale's closing jaws. Claire, his closest teammate, had her eyes locked on the creature, refusing to look away for even a second. "Mark its position! Do not lose it!" she shouted to the boat crew. More whales were now surfacing and feeding, making it nearly impossible to distinguish one from another. But Claire's focus was absolute. She could see the unique scarring on the dorsal fin of the whale that had taken Ethan. It was their only link to him. Inside the whale, Ethan's training and scientific knowledge fought against the rising tide of primal fear. He knew he couldn't be swallowed, but he was trapped in a space the size of a small room, sharing it with a tongue that weighed more than an elephant. His air was limited. The pressure of the whale's jaw muscles could crush him, and there was no protocol, no training manual for how to escape from inside a living creature. Time was slipping away. He could feel the whale beginning a slow, powerful descent, carrying him deeper into the dark, silent world of the ocean. Inside the warm, dark cavern, Ethan's training took over, a bulwark against the rising tide of primal fear. He knew he couldn't be swallowed, but that scientific fact provided little comfort. He was trapped. His first instinct was to try a non-aggressive approach. Reaching out, he tapped firmly on the whale's massive, muscular tongue, hoping the unexpected sensation might cause the creature to react and open its mouth. Instead, the opposite happened. The tongue shifted upward, pressing him firmly against the roof of the mouth and the hard baleen plates, increasing the pressure around his body and making it harder to breathe. His air supply was now his most critical enemy. The gauge on his wrist showed his tank was running dangerously low, a consequence of his earlier decision to stay a few moments too long. Panic began to set in, making his breathing quicker and shallower, consuming the precious remaining air even faster. Realizing a gentle approach had failed, he switched to a more desperate tactic. Bracing his back against the tongue, he began to kick with all his might against the curtain of baleen plates, hoping the annoying, rhythmic impacts would irritate the whale enough to spit him out. But it was like kicking a reinforced wall. His energy drained with each fruitless blow, and the whale gave no reaction. On the surface, the team was in a state of controlled chaos. Claire held the radio, her voice tight with urgency as she relayed the impossible situation to the Coast Guard. "One of our divers has been engulfed by a whale. We are tracking the animal now. We need assistance." The reply that crackled back over the speaker was what she had feared most. The Coast Guard had no protocol for such an event. It was completely unprecedented. They were advised to keep their distance and monitor the situation. The message was clear. They were on their own. A heavy silence fell over the boat. They were seasoned professionals, but they were trained for equipment failure and medical emergencies, not for extracting a man from inside a living creature. Just as despair began to set in, an idea, born of desperation, sparked in Claire's mind. She remembered documentaries about behavioral conditioning in marine mammals. "We can't reason with it," she said, her voice cutting through the tension, "but we might be able to trigger a response." Her plan was a wild, long shot, but it was the only one they had. She proposed using chumming, throwing large quantities of fish into the water near the whale to try and re-stimulate its feeding reflex, hoping it would cause the creature to open its mouth again to scoop up the easy meal. After a tense debate and a final desperate call to the Coast Guard for clearance, they received a stunning reply. Permission granted. A nearby Coast Guard support boat was diverted to their location, arriving minutes later with crates of fish. The team worked in a flurry of motion, their fear now channeled into a singular purpose. "Let's make it count," Claire commanded, her voice sharp and focused. One by one, they began tossing the fish into the water, creating a shimmering silver trail leading directly to the whale that held their friend captive. They stood at the edge of the deck, their eyes fixed on the massive creature, waiting, praying for the plan to work. The ocean, which had felt like a second home just an hour before, now felt like an alien world holding Ethan hostage. Inside the whale, Ethan's strength was fading. He was on the verge of blacking out when he felt a sudden shift. The water around him began to move, a gentle current pulling him toward the front of the mouth. Then, a sliver of brilliant blue light cut through the darkness as the whale's massive jaws began to open. The current grew stronger, and he was propelled forward. But in that brief, illuminated moment before his expulsion, his scientist's eye caught something impossible. Clinging to the interior of the whale's mouth were clusters of small, brightly scaled fish with a unique bioluminescent pattern along their sides. His mind raced. He recognized them instantly from old textbooks. They were a species thought to have been extinct for over 1,000,000 years. Even with his air almost gone and freedom just inches away, his lifelong instincts took over. He raised his camera, his trembling hands somehow steadying the lens, and snapped several high-resolution photos of the impossible colony thriving in this unbelievable ecosystem. A moment later, he was forcefully expelled from the whale's mouth in a rush of water and fish. He kicked hard, fighting his way toward the light, his lungs burning. He burst through the surface, gasping for air, the relief so overwhelming it was a physical blow. He was alive. He was free. He took a moment, floating on his back, the sun warm on his face. But as he caught his breath and looked around, a new, cold dread washed over him. In the chaos of the rescue, he had surfaced a great distance from his boat. It was nowhere in sight. He was utterly alone in the vast, open ocean. On the boat, the team had seen the whale open its mouth and expel a plume of water, but there was no sign of Ethan. A wave of despair washed over Claire. "What if we followed the wrong one?" she muttered. But then her eyes caught a tiny, dark shape bobbing on the waves in the far distance. "There!" she screamed, pointing. "That has to be him!" Without waiting for an order, she slammed the throttle forward, and the boat roared to life, racing across the water toward the distant figure. As they drew closer, they could see it was Ethan, his form weak, struggling to stay above the surface. They reached him just as his strength gave out, pulling his exhausted body from the water and onto the deck. He lay there, coughing and gasping, as his teammates surrounded him, their faces a mixture of tears and overwhelming relief. After a few moments, he pushed himself up, his eyes wide with an emotion that wasn't fear but pure, unadulterated excitement. "You're not going to believe what I saw in there," he said, his voice rough but clear. "Inside the whale, I found something that's not supposed to exist, and I have photos." He fumbled for his camera, his hands still shaking, and showed them the images on the small screen. The crew leaned in, their jaws dropping as they stared at the impossible, glowing fish, a species long lost to science, now rediscovered in the last place on Earth anyone could have imagined.